Well, a very good afternoon to you, a very good morning to you, wherever you are listening to this podcast, or perhaps you're listening to this webinar on your favorite streaming service. My name is Natalie Ashdown from Open Door Coaching, and it's a pleasure to have our resident HR specialist, Paula Jones Hunt, on the line. Welcome, Paula, to our very final Coaching Cafe for 2022, which I cannot believe we're actually saying.
I know, it seems crazy. Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here, and I can't believe how quickly the year goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So this Coaching Cafe, we're going to be reflecting on the year in Coaching Cafes. Before we do that, let me just acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we're all meeting today, or perhaps you're listening to this webinar. And we acknowledge the traditional owners, their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities of Australia, but not only Australia, to all the international communities, because we know that people listen to these podcasts from all around the world, including our friends in Denver, Colorado, where our dear friend and our business partner, Emma Doyle, hangs out. So we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Paula, so we're going to have a look at our agenda for today, and it really is to capture the highlights of our Coaching Cafes, recap those themes that we said. Do you know, back in February, we actually identified some top themes for 2022 that we thought would play out and how we needed to respond as coaches and as leaders to those themes. So we'll take a look at what happened today with you, which will be very exciting. But for those of you that are new to the Coaching Cafe, we are all about creating community. We're about sharing our learned experiences, having thought-provoking conversations, and we have certainly been able to do this year. Coming together for the Coaching Cafe every Friday. As you know, I've said it nearly every Friday, it's been a highlight of our week to come together with the alumni in this way. So once again, thank you to you all coming on the line, and we look forward to you interacting with us and telling us what you think around the themes as we go along. So shall we kick off, Paula?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Well, let's talk first about the highlights of what we've achieved this year. First of all, we have been able to run 14 Coaching Cafes with the CCUs attached, and I can't believe that, actually. From February, we did have a couple of breaks where we ran the highlight reels as well. But we've also just clicked over 3,000 podcast downloads. And we only really started getting those podcasts going mid-year. So whilst we know that a lot of people tune into the webinar live, like you're doing now, there's hundreds of people that actually listen to the podcast. Paula, I think one of the biggest things that I've really enjoyed is having our alumni come back as guest speakers, and we've been able to feature their books as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think having some of our alumni who go on and do amazing pieces of work all over the place, and having them come back and tell us what they're doing and what's going on is actually one of my favorite things to do as well. I think it's great to hear what's happening.
And also draw on everyone's experience, which is what we really love to do during these Coaching Cafes. We also did that when we had features for International Coach Week this year, and also Mental Health Awareness Week, which we'll talk about a little bit more as well. So yeah, an absolute pleasure to have delivered so many free Coaching Cafes. And as you all know, this is for your development, but it's also for our development and our way that we connect in, we create community, and we have shared learning experiences. And of course, a highlight has to be the launch of What Makes a Great Coach, which we have been talking about nonstop over the past few weeks as well. So if we're to now take a look at the themes, Paula, one of the themes that we did discuss at the beginning of the year was that the ICF would drive and increase professionalism in the industry. And for those of you that are listening to this, I will read this out. The ICF were driving a new way of credentialing that it accredits an entire organization rather than specific curriculum or a program. Accrediting whole organizations in terms of being a leading global practice. And they wanted to send a strong message of credibility and congruence for organizations, for programs, for the profession, that allows everyone to live a gold standard. The big changes, of course, were around the removal of ACTH and the ACTP designations, the introduction of level 1 and level 2 and level 3 organizations, an introduction to the upgrade of the ICF core competencies. So in response, Open Door actually did get accredited in August 2022. And we were accredited for level 1 training programs and level 2 training programs, which was a big highlight. And Paula, everyone has been asking us, when are we going to roll over? Well, actually, we've been accredited, but the process of actually rolling to the new accreditations, when you think about what we have to update, is quite significant. So we've been working on that in the background. All of our programs from 2023 will have the new designation. So that's exciting news from a professionalism point of view.
Yeah, and I've been talking to lots of people. I get the pleasure of talking to lots of people who are looking at coaching and building their capability and heading into the industry. And there's a lot of buzz about ICF and wanting to not only be recognised in Australia, but from an international perspective. So I think it's quite intuitive that ICF have actually gone down this path, because I think it's something that more and more is coming to the forefront for coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for those of you that did listen to the webinar that we did hold during the year, it was off the basis of extensive research that they actually did, particularly around the ICF core competencies as well. So the ICF core competencies were updated, and you can catch up with that webinar to find out about the research that they did. And of course, there's an enormous amount of information on their website as well. So yeah, what does it mean to our alumni? Well, it means that you are up to date in terms of the latest credentialing standards. If you're doing the program, if you are graduating, you'll be, as from 2023, you will have the new designation. For those of you that have already graduated, you don't really have to worry, I suppose, but you do and can be assured that as we roll out programs and coaching cafes, they will be linked to the new core competencies. So that's quite exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turning to the second theme, Paula, at the beginning of the year, we talked about the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, actually, and this continued to be a discussion that we saw a lot in the mainstream media. What I was concerned about, I think, was, well, we hear what we're hearing in the media, but what does the research and the data actually say? So I went to take a look at the research. I like to go to Gallup, as you know, because I find their research is extensive, but it's also very easy to understand and very targeted as well. And so Gallup actually did find, when they surveyed people in June 2022, that the level of engagement, percentage of engagement in the workplace was going down over the last couple of years, and the level of disengagement was going up. So that whole idea of the Great Resignation and quiet quitting was actually real. But what I'm interested in is, have a look at this chart that I found. There's not a massive spread in terms of the data, but it's interesting to me, like, you know, it's been hovering around, say, 20%, then disengagement has, went down, but now it's starting to go up. But there's only about a 2 and 3% spread. What is interesting is, though, a 2 to 3% or even a 5% spread in organizations is a significant number of people when we think about some of the large organizations we work with. So you might think, oh, a 2% spread, a 5% spread, that's not much, but it's significant when we look at the numbers.
Yeah, it's also significant if you work for a small organisation. If you've got 5 people working in your organisation, it basically means one person's disengaged, which has a massive impact. Whereas if you're working in a larger organisation, it means there's a greater number of people, 1 in 5 in every department, every area is disengaged when you think about it from that perspective. The interesting thing for me, there's a couple in here, is 2008 was the financial crisis period. So that's where there was some more disengagement. But I think you're right. There's always been disengagement. It's not. I loved the quiet resignation, the great resignation, quiet quitting. And when I heard that, I was like, that's actually not new for me, because working with organisations, there's always a group of people for whom it's not the right spot for them. It's not the right time for them. They've been there for too long. They're not getting what they need from it. So, and to be honest, I thought it might have risen a little bit more, but I think one of the things that did happen was that COVID taught us that you could work from home. COVID taught us that we can be way more flexible with how we work with our employees, and there would be a bunch of people for whom that would have been a bonus. So their engagement would have risen because that is now possible for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that, and sharing your HR background kicks in there as well. I think you're absolutely right. We have to remember that these statistics are actually saying that 1 in 5 people are disengaged. And as you say, that's a large percentage of the organisation. That 32% are actually engaged. That does leave a massive gap, that 50% in the middle. So there's a lot that we can do in this area around engagement. And I can see there's a lot of our alumni, expert coaches and the like on the line. So please feel free to kick in and tell us what your thoughts are here. What we did to respond, we looked at coaching upwards at the beginning of the year. We looked at, we introduced Melvin Liao's new book, Engage is the name of the book. And it was great to actually focus on engagement generally in our lives, but also career engagement. And of course, we ran not 1, but 2 webinars with Veronica Millen talking about career agility. And she specifically addressed these topics of great resignation and quiet quitting. So I was really pleased to be able to bring in the experts from the alumni, in particular, people that have authored books on the topic. And I found Veronica's discussion about career agility quite inspiring, actually, and how we can refocus on our careers and use coaching to enable people to refocus on their careers and refocus on what's most important. And I think she gave us a really great reframe around focusing on what's most important as part of that conversation. So there's a great opportunity to actually obviously address engagement. A lot of statistics on how coaching actually enables engagement in the workplace as well. And I can see the people on the line, you'll have experience with that. So moving on then to theme number 3. I love this quote from Albert Einstein. I fear the day that technology will surpass human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots. Now, we posted this at the beginning of 2011, beg your pardon, 2021 and 2022, because it was relevant then that we were all moving to working from home, many meetings over Zoom, and that has continued in 2022 as well. There's a number of organisations have moved to a hybrid structure. Now, the impact that we were interested in actually, Paula, the theme was around performance conversations. What I was interested in is that we suspected that in 2021 and in 2022, the impact of the global pandemic meant that maybe people didn't have performance reviews, maybe performance discussions were being put off. And there we felt was a big opportunity actually to take a really positive approach and take a coaching approach to performance conversations. What were your thoughts about that?
Yeah, there were lots of organisations. There's lots of organisations who link performance and bonuses. And in a period where there's uncertainty and bonuses may not get paid, I think sometimes what happens is people go, oh, well, we don't need to have the conversation because it's not going to lead anything. From my perspective, I actually think the two need to be separated. I think they're 2 completely different pieces of work. One is about what did you achieve? And one is about how are you contributing to the organisation? What are you learning? successes are you having? What are the challenges that you're having? And it's not just about, did I hit the targets? Because bonuses generally sit in that I hit the target space, because there can be people who don't hit targets but have really made a great contribution to the organization. And there are people who can hit targets who've made a terrible contribution to the organization in other toxic ways. So sometimes when you hit a pandemic, the performance conversations get pushed down to the bottom because there's no bonus to link it with. But in actual fact, this is the time when people need the most amount of opportunity to get feedback and growth and development, because they're working in a space of continual change, and people need to know how they're going through that change, what's working well, how can their voice be heard. If they've got concerns, how do they raise them? And when they raise them, what happens to that? And when people are doing a great job in a pandemic, this is the point that this is the pinnacle where you go, oh my goodness, that is amazing, because you're managing to still deliver in this time when there's such change and uncertainty.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the coaching response here is so important. And we delivered a lot of workshops this year, which were around coaching in performance reviews, coaching around the annual plans, coaching around tricky conversations. And I did find in those workshops that the tricky conversations had been kind of left because of the last 2 years that we have experienced, and now they were sort of bubbling to the surface that we needed to be able to have these conversations. So it's the coaching approach actually to having these conversations was so important. And Leanne, thank you, has jumped in and said, Paula, your sessions around taking a coaching approach to reviews were excellent. So those podcasts and those webinars were amongst our most highly rated webinars. So we knew that there was a theme here, and we knew that people needed more knowledge around coaching in that area. And of course, then you call on the alumni and yourself, Paula. There's so much wealth of knowledge we can share. So wonderful.
Yeah, and I like to make managers' jobs a little easier, because I think they have a really tough job. So if you take a coaching approach in your performance reviews, etc., your life will be so much easier, because you don't have to, it's not up to you, it's actually up to the individual, and your job is to support and guide them through it. I think that's a much easier way of doing it.
Absolutely, by asking those great coaching questions. Yeah, absolutely. So if we're to move on to theme number 4, Paula, mental health awareness, definitely a theme throughout the last 2 years. So I'm switching around here. Definitely a theme throughout the last 2 years, but not just the last 2 years. It's always been a theme. It's always been something that we need to focus on. And again, this year, extremely important. I did take a look at there's new data that's been released, which is great. Gives us a reality check on how we are as a country, as a nation, but also as a global community. There's new research being released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, new reports being released by the World Health Organization. There appears to be a really new affirming approach to mental health and mental health conversations, which is great to see. Still 1 in 5 Australians experiencing a mental health condition. We are concerned, and I know there's some mental health first aid practitioners in youth on the line, about the increase in mental health conditions in our young people. So our people aged, say, between the ages of 12 and 24. So there's so much more work we can do, and more attention that we can apply.
Yeah, and I think it has always been there. It's not been talked about as much as it currently is. And I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we have no idea what the impact of COVID is going to be in 5 to 10 years' time. I think too, different states experience different things. And I recently came to Melbourne, and there was just a different feel about how people had lived through COVID. And I was lucky enough to be in the state that shut everybody out. And our experience was different. But I think too, in 5 to 10 years' time, there'll be data on what impact that's had to children's learning. I think children's, if we think about relationships, there were impacts to relationships, and they all connect into someone's mental health. And I think the one thing I'd like to see moving forward in this space is, yes, it's that how do we help people who are currently having a mental health condition? And then I think the flip side too of this is, how do we make sure that people don't get to the point where they're having a mental health condition? So how do we do some of that pre-work so that people are really focusing and taking care of themselves, so that it might have led to a mental health condition, but it didn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So that looking after ourselves, that prevention, the focus on mental health awareness, significantly for ourselves, but also obviously for our work colleagues. And coaching really can play a huge role in this, as we know. So there's the new studies that have been released that we're going to be catching up with as well. In response, we did run Mental Health Awareness Week, and we have been running mental health first aid training, and I can see that Ian Scott's on the line, so he has been a really pivotal part in helping us lead that training here at Open Door Coaching, which is wonderful. And yourself, Paula, becoming accredited, which is wonderful. The other thing I would point out is we ran a couple of coaching cafes and webinars on how to have a mental health conversation. This was around managers knowing what to say, and it was around Mental Health Awareness Week, but we also ran those a couple of times during the year. They were our highest rated webinars and podcasts. So more people tuned into those podcasts than any other podcast, in particular to understand how might we take a conversational, a coaching approach to mental health conversations. And, you know, yourself and Ian leading those conversations was, I think, a real highlight to think about how we can actually have a coaching conversation.
Yeah, I think we have to make it part of our normal everyday language as a manager.
Yeah.
And when we looked at that, we really looked at the fact that it's about reaching out to someone and saying, I've noticed something different. Is everything all right? Is there something we can do to help? What's going on for you? And I think it sits in that engagement piece as well. If you've got people who've got high engagement who suddenly don't have high engagement, as a manager, that's your first point of call. Is everything all right? You know, and the more you know about your staff, the more you are connected with them, the better relationships you have, the happier people are.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, there's those everyday conversations that we encourage, the everyday coaching conversations. You know, those webinars that you ran and the training that you've run and Ian's run, they all really do focus on, you know, listening, having those great conversations. And I think significantly breaking down the barriers to be able to have those conversations, the everyday conversations, as you say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, moving on to the theme number 5. We did say at the beginning of the year that there would be an increased focus on professional development. We say that every year because we can see that in the work that we're doing with people and with our clients and our organizations. I did know that What Makes a Great Coach would be released. I didn't know when it was going to be released. And of course, we had hoped that we might hit Amazon #1 bestseller in certain categories. And we did that, which was a really a wonderful achievement. I think what's been wonderful for me is we did focus on each of the practices of the world's best coaches throughout the coaching cafes. And it really did give an opportunity to think about our practice as coaches. How do we demonstrate empathy? How do we bring a listening? But not only listening, what more can we do around listening? What more can we do around empathy? What more can we do around things like coaching around resilience and purpose and passion and energy and all the practices? So in writing the book, it was a great opportunity to reflect, but also I found that in reviewing each of the practices with the alumni on the Coaching Cafe, it was just a really great opportunity to reflect. And so many great questions that we were all throwing out there around each practice. So it's almost worthwhile re-listening to the coaching cafes to pick up all the questions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, sometimes as coaches, we're busy helping and coaching other people and we kind of forget about ourselves. And this continuous professional development is one of those areas where I'll get to that or I'll do that, and this book really resonates for me as a coach. I know I really love the sport overlay from the coaching perspective, but from an actual coaching perspective, not just I'm someone yelling at the kids on the field to get moving. That genuine coaching approach that crosses over between sport and business. And it really was just, I agree, going through each of those different topics, there were so many things that I came out of it and said, oh, I'd really like to try this now. I heard that, and that was a great question. Or that little story, that little snippet really impacted me. And I think sometimes you need to hear something at the time that you need to hear it. So you can read it, you might have read it before and then you read it at a different time and it really hits because there's something going on in your world that's important for you at that point in time. So I think the launch has been amazing. The response has been amazing. The ability to be connected with it through the coaching cafes is a gift as far as I'm concerned. And I think that you and Emma have done an amazing job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's so beautiful of you to say. And I felt the same way, actually. So it's kind of like an out-of-body experience. Yes, we're the authors. And at the same time, we're doing the practices. We are reflecting and thinking about our own development through the practices. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And of course, thank you to everyone who's purchased a copy of the book. As an author, you hope that it will be purchased. And not only was it purchased, but it was pushed to Amazon number one in a lot of categories. A little funny side note for you, Paula. You know this, but perhaps the alumni don't know. We actually achieved #1 bestseller in so many categories, which was amazing. It was in leadership, in HR, in workplace, in culture. But on the book launch, we still hadn't hit #1 in coaching and mentoring. And I remember being happy, but not satisfied until we actually hit, #1 in the actual category that we wanted to own, which was in coaching and mentoring. And then I kind of relaxed and I was happy. So it was a little bit of a wake-up call for me, actually, to be grateful. Like, I was grateful, I was happy, but I still needed to hit that other category. So and then I was able to relax.
Such a high performer, Natalie.
Oh, thank you. Well, that leaves us with the last thing we need to say, and that is thank you to you all who have joined us on the podcast, on the webinars, over throughout the year, for over 40 actual professional development opportunities through the Coaching Cafe. I reflect on the fact that it has still been a very tough year for many people. Here in Australia, we've had the natural disasters with the floods. We've had impacts of interest rate rises. We've had impact of cost of living increases that are real for people. We've had a lot of stress and pressure for people coming off the pandemic and things continuing to cause pressure and stress for people. So, it's in that space, I think, also that we express gratitude and thanks, because the alumni and our wider audience that we have give us this opportunity to come together and to focus on our professional development and take this time out. And I feel so grateful for everyone that interacts and comes together. And I'm very grateful for the Open Door team, very grateful for the Open Door alumni and our wider community, and very grateful to be able to make a difference in the way that we are.
Yeah, and I'd add in there that the stars aligned and the universe came together, and I came back to the Open Door team.
Yes, yes.
And I cannot tell you how grateful I am on a daily basis that that has happened. And I love the Open Door team, and I love the alumni, and I love being able to talk to new students, and I love being able to jump on these webinars and be able to listen to you and Emma and Bridget and all of our guest speakers, because it is just such a gift to hear people's life experience and their knowledge and input into lots of different areas. So I am extremely grateful and thankful that the webinars exist and that I get invited to come on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's been a highlight actually to have you and have your HR experience, particularly, Paula. It's just added another secret element and secret sauce to to the experience that you've been able to bring. So thank you again. To everyone who has been part of listening to the podcasts, downloading them, including including this as part of your professional development. And yeah, a big shout out to the people who have joined us internationally. There's been hundreds of people. And the US, we've been running these at a time that the US, our US colleagues can join us as well. We are grateful and we do say thank you. Next year, we have the Diploma of Organizational Coaching, the Cert 4 in Workplace and Business Coaching. We'll be doing mental health first aid training, leader as coach, lots of things coming up, so you can check our website. But in the meantime, we have to refresh. We have to have a rest. For those of us in Australia, we're heading into our summer break. I know if you are listening internationally, you're heading into the cold winter Christmas. But it's time to refresh. It's time to reconnect. It's time to rejuvenate ourselves. Love the people we love, etc., etc. And we will be back in 2023 with a massive program for you. But for now, we say thank you. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to catching up with you after the break.
Thank you, everyone.